Zareene Choudhury. I'm a senior consultant in data governance and data management at Oakland. We're data consultancy, a B Corp data consultancy based in Leeds. And we do pretty much everything data, which is what I try to show with my background here. So I'm in one of the meeting rooms in the office. And everything from data engineering, data platforms to data strategy and operating models, etc. So that's me in a nutshell. Richard, you go.
Thank you. Yes, so I'm Richard Adams. I work for Quest, and I've been with Quest about 5 years now, and I work currently working with different customers to make sure they get the value out of our solutions to support them on data governance journeys and AI governance. So I know our Erwin solutions very well, and prior to that, I lived very much a data governance, data quality, data architecture career with large organizations such as HSBC and GlaxoSmithKline at different levels, but experiencing the different challenges that people have had across those organizations. So I feel like after about 20, 25 years now of working in this world, I've seen different perspectives, I've seen different challenges, and I know that a number of ways that these things can be addressed, whether it's talking about the technology or the processes or the culture that often needs to shift. So yeah, good to be here. Good to be able to talk about this topic.
So we've got a little bit less than an hour now in terms of what Richard and I are going to be talking through today. Is of course AI is all over the place at the moment. Businesses are very much investing, deploying, implementing AI solutions to try and bring additional value to the business and solve whether it's operational or reporting challenges, etc. So what we're going to do within this hour is just run through in terms of how the AI challenges link to data and data challenges, and how data governance can help resolve, help address, help flesh out those data issues that you might see when you are deploying AI, implementing AI, or even trying to explore what AI use cases you want to implement within the business. So we will leave some time at the end to see what questions the audience has. So feel free to put your questions in the chat as Richard and I are talking, if you're thinking of anything else. And then what we'll do at the end, we'll try and pick one or two questions depending on time to run through. Cool. Shall I go on to the next slide now?
Yeah, I think so. Go for that.
Yes. Ginger?
So,
okay, the big stats.
So this is one of the statistics. You've got 20% of AI projects succeed and 80% do not. So this is what companies are saying. Zareene, where have you seen this, and where does this resonate in the world that you've experienced?
So I've actually seen this stat from a study that RAND produced a couple of years, a year and a bit ago now. I mean, when AI was really much in the front scene. And just context, so RAN is a non-profit organization. I mean, they're global. They do a lot around research and policy making to help businesses make better decisions around strategy, etc. And what they did is that they looked at AI projects that are currently being run and asked the question in terms of what's helping those projects succeed or not. And interestingly, a lot of the theme around the challenges of why a lot of AI projects struggle is around data. Data quality, data ownership, understanding the landscape, which we'll talk more about during the webinar. I also want to, so this is a stat that we put in when Richard and I were prepping for this webinar, but actually a few days ago, I saw that Gartner actually put another stat out, which is in terms of through 2025, 30% of generative AI projects will be abandoned or might be abandoned due to poor data quality, inadequate risk controls, and not really having clear business use cases for those AI. So there's a lot of theme here that I would say for organizations, it's data is quite critical. What's your thought, Richard?
I think there's an excitement a lot of the time around the concept of AI, that people would love to be able to be more automated and competitive. But I think that foundation on the data is absolutely critical. And I think then people might not understand, people who are not so close to the systems and know how those particular, the architecture is set up, or vulnerabilities might exist in the data quality, who work in the depths of that. Might have challenges explaining and might be perceived as being a bit negative to some of the visionaries higher up the chain in the company. So, and there might be a miscommunication or misunderstanding along the way to say, well, why can't we do X, Y, Z? And it's, there needs to be a strong foundation, a strong governance principle that exists to be allowing companies to proceed with some of the more exciting ambitions that they might have around AI. So if they don't see results, maybe they're given up, or there's misdirection, or there's other challenges that exist to prevent it from proceeding. Yeah, and dynamic leadership as well, to actually push things through regardless of the challenges in front of them, I think is important too. You can't lose the passion, you can't lose the investment if you really want to do this in a structured and a successful manner.
Yeah, and I think linking it back to the data or data governance aspect of things for this webinar, I think we see AI at its core as a data product, as in at its core, it's powered by data. The adage is like the adage that you see everywhere is garbage in, garbage out. Well, I think I'm a little bit more. I like to put a bit of rosy paint against things. So I think of it more of a system thinking, where your output of your AI is going to be very much reflective of the input that you're putting through it. So I think the stats that we're seeing reflect, and the challenges against those stats, the theme around it is very much an underlying data challenge, which is why data governance is important. Yeah.
So and then should we go to the next slide and see?
I think so. This goes really well onto the next slide, actually.
So, sort of touching then on some of the points I was kind of alluding to. If you're basing your AI decision making on certain data, and that data is inaccurate, then the outcome is going to be inaccurate. You're going to be replicating or scaling up the errors that already exist. So you have to have confidence in that quality is living up to a standard that you need to then extrapolate that out for the use on a grander scale. So those minor issues that might exist today need to be properly looked at. There needs to be a structured way of actually rectifying those. And if you start off without fully understanding that the kind of architecture you're looking at and where things come from, that provenance of the data, and the clear accountability that's needed at each of the stages of that life cycle, then it makes it very difficult to be able to trust it. Where is it coming from? How old is it? Who do I talk to about certain topics? So these things, I think, might be presumed to be in place in some cases, because if you're a data scientist creating an AI model for a particular purpose, you kind of presume that the person in the next chain behind you is giving you information is accurate, and so forth and so forth. But if there isn't that understanding of the architecture in that holistical manner, then how do you know where it's coming from? How do you trust it? I think there's like a default stance in many cases to trust AI, but you never really ask that question, why is it happening? Where is it coming from? So I think that's a significant challenge for any of any company going about this process. There's a few of the items on the slide here, but if these topics were questioned in a kind of devil's advocate way when somebody's starting an AI governance program, then I think that might uncover a few vulnerabilities and it might provoke conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you. I mean, we say that AI gets your data talking, because especially when we're talking about AI, we're talking about not just structured data. So it becomes a little bit more challenging, I would say, to really understand the data quality aspect of things, when we're talking about unstructured data. But using that AI to help you flesh out where the data is, you might see issues with the data that you might not necessarily have seen unless you had flushed it through AI. But going back to some of the issues around why we're talking data governance versus you mentioned AI governance. I know there is, and we'll talk about it later on in the webinar, but there's a lot of parallel between the challenges that we're seeing with AI around the data and the challenges that you see with data management. And hence why things like missing data, duplication, things like you've just mentioned, like the ownership, who do you go to in the business who has expertise in those specific data domains, the whole privacy and security aspect of your data when we're talking about business confidential information or personal information. So there's all these are things that you would hear in typical data management challenges, which data governance addresses, and that links to the data processes around clear approval pathways, accountabilities, feedback mechanisms, all questions, all potential blockers that can be turned into opportunities if it's done right to build the capabilities.
I think there was an additional probably layer of process on top of when you're using AI. It's not just I didn't say it's just a traditional data management part. That is crucial. But then there's an additional consideration because there's specific regulations around it. There's specific ways that you might want engagement on certain things, on certain specified data for use for certain process means. How you might want to set up a shop of sorts, a marketplace, to be able to search and find certain content. So there could be that additional layer of potentially more exciting, dynamic kind of conversational points. But the bedrock are of the types of challenges and the types of solutions to that are the traditional ones that a lot of people are very familiar with. So there's good standing allows you to then build further into the concepts of governing AI specifically. But yeah.
Okay. And I think it's useful here maybe that we move on to this point around there are some nuances when we're talking about requirements for a trustworthy AI. Yes, we're saying that the challenges might have a lot of parallels to traditional data management or more traditional data products, but it's good to keep an eye on from a regulatory perspective, from a product perspective. It's got a little bit more complexity when we're talking about trustworthy tool, trustworthy AI.
Yes. And now I look at this with a certain slant because of my experience working for large organizations in the past, but arguably before AI was a really hot topic in recent years, admittedly. But the element which I find quite the most useful argument, I would say, to get backing would be more around that central column. Not around we must abide by the law, But how do we make our company competitive? How do we have the edge over the equivalent company on the next doorstep? So how do we make ourselves efficient? How does the results of the data that we're using going to get the result that we need? So, how do we get the result that we need it's going to give us the right decision-making capabilities that's going to make us the most efficient and robust processes within the company? How do we make sure, employees get paid accurately on time? How do we make sure that we're marketing the right products at the right time and to the right audience? How do we make
Yeah.
sure that accuracy exists in the products we're producing? Whatever that might be, that is probably the biggest, strongest argument, because the lawful side, yes, you don't want to fine, you don't want the bad press, you don't want all of that. But it's not as exciting as forward thinking and dynamic, maybe, as maybe the topics in the central column about how you want to make a robust, scalable, competitive environment for your company to operate in. And I am sometimes quite cynical about the column on the right. There's no obligation, really, for a lot of companies to be like, to cover the ethical side. It's certainly
We talked about it, isn't it? We were
well,
trying to find ways that would be relevant to the industries that we've worked in, and it's, oh my God.
oh yeah, but it is certainly the right thing to do, and it is a nice working environment when everything fits that, and it's very marketable as a topic in its own right to say we're doing the right thing, and this is how we support certain things. But if we're talking about driving action, I'd say that central column is probably this the biggest argument, and then the others are supporting. But what have you witnessed, Zareene? What's your
And I think I my brain is always thinking data management, data governance.
yeah
I know the not too exciting part of data management, but I think if you have if we take a step back, when we're talking about the guiding principles for trustworthy AI, I 100% agree with you. It is very much a balancing act between you having the essential guardrails in place, so you're not breaking any law and you're not going to get into trouble as an organization. Yes, keeping an eye on the ethical side of things if your use cases are directly impacting people's lives or people's well-being or society. So there is that aspect which you can include in your risk assessment, for example, if you're building the use cases. But I agree with you, the middle part of these guiding principles around accountability, security, the governance, how do you have feedback mechanisms to continuously improve the solution, but also to address existing issues that are being picked up as it's being used. So all of that having that clearly documented. But again, I'm a very pragmatic person. When I say documented, not heavy 10s or 50 pages of policy, but it's more documentation at a level that if anyone or auditors or anyone within the business would ask, oh, what data sets are these AI models using? You have it somewhere that is documented. Who's gatekeeping the quality of these data sets? You know what the answer is. So we're not talking about heavy policies. We're talking about having pragmatic answers to very basic questions, which helps you build a trustworthy AI. So yes, those guiding principles are definitely useful reference points to help you build the trustworthy solutions. But again, with me and my nerdy data governance hat on, I still think a lot of the aspects of data governance helps. It doesn't 100%. AI has more complexity with the data sets, but it's the right starting point for the foundations. Go back to what you said.
yeah
Important around the foundations.
I think building elements into this, like the ethics side of things and the compliance side of things, into the design of the different AI use. What do you actually want to achieve with using the AI? And then how do you bake in the fact that we now know we're compliant? We now know that we are following an ethical best practice within our company that we've agreed. So that if
Yeah.
somebody says, I want to do something new, and they say, okay, that's fine, what's your suggestion? Then the right people have eyes on it. Maybe it's a data protection officer, maybe it's an HR component to it. Then that's fine. So that you go through the protocols and you know that you're ticking the boxes, if you will, but you're following those guide rails, those guiding principles, so that you don't step over a line and have to do any rework, or you might get in trouble with somebody later. So
Yeah.
baked into it as a framework, then I think you're safer and you can be more efficient in the way you devise things.
Yeah. And it might not be as straightforward like us saying it. There's a set of activities, there's a set of capabilities that underpins all of what we're talking about here. Because I imagine, like what we've heard clients say, well, we're not sure where to start. We know the theory of it. We know we need to govern our AI. We know we need to have those guiding principles, but what does that mean in real life for our business? Like, well, pragmatically, what does that mean? Where do we start? And going back to the foundational capabilities is important, which I think is a good place to move on to the next slide, actually, because we can dig a little bit more into this. Okay. Are you happy for me to keep this one up?
Yes, absolutely. So in simple terms then, what's the difference between data governance and AI governance? What's your opinion?
So I think AI governance is inherently broader than just the data, because when you're talking about an AI solution, it's the governance of the model itself, how you are building the model, so the whole DevOps side of things and the coding behind it, so the model itself. So it's not just about the data, it's about the architecture that it's sitting on, the pipelines and the security aspect of it, whether you have the right policies or security or access mechanisms to make sure that the data is secure. Yes, it is. We are talking data, but it is not just the data, it's the architecture also that we're talking about. But interestingly, when we talk about, if we're saying AI governance, ultimately we're doing AI governance so that we are in the green zone when it comes to compliance to regulation and legislation. And interestingly, if you're looking at existing guidelines for the UK, it's around guidelines. For the EU AI Act, it's the law, but the theme is the same. It's around having the right documentation so that you can show whether your AI is safe and controlled in adequate manner. And yes, there are different levels of documentations that you would need based on the potential risk of those AI. But the theme is around having visibility and documentation and understanding and being able to demonstrate that understanding for those documentation of what your AI is doing. And if we mirror that to data governance, it's pretty much the same theme here, but around the data itself. So do we have documentation on what data? So if we talk about data governance from a broader perspective, irrespective of AI use cases or not. So good data governance means, do we have visibility of the data landscape within the organization? Who owns it? Who has the expertise or the accountability to make decisions around it? If we were to, for example, like typical scenarios that I've come across before in data governance is someone in the business coming in and not intentionally, but having a real need for a new piece of data and just going straight to IT and saying, could we have this added to the database? And it breaks everything down because there was no one who was gatekeeping that data set because you didn't have an actual formal accountability around it. So yeah, so data governance really is trying to give that visibility of that landscape and accountabilities and roles and mechanisms to control that data landscape. So we did put a line here, don't boil the ocean. I always like saying that. So yes, there are parallels with data governance and AI governance. But what I mean by don't boil the ocean is that if you are an organization who already has some form or starting to have some form of data governance capabilities or data management capabilities, leverage that to build your AI governance. Sorry, Richard, I'm talking a lot here.
No, that's fine. That's a question. For me, I feel like the almost AI governance is that extension of data governance. It's like if you had fantastic data governance framework and maybe for the last 10, 20 years or something, or it was gradually built over that time, and you're confident, and then somebody says, oh, let's do more with AI. But then effectively the people who want to use the data for AI are again just another type of data consumer from your sources of truth, from your reporting tools, whatever it might be. And you could say, well, I've got a business reason to do this, to use AI for this particular purpose. Then you're leaning on existing policies and processes and clear accountability that's already been established. Everyone knows their role already.
Yeah.
You are just another person who said, I want to use data for X. And so that's a good, I feel like that would, so that's why I feel it's an extension, but there's an extra layer of justification or due diligence that's needed. Because when we talked about, if you look at, when GDPR came out years ago now, there was automated processing articles within that. If you process using automation, then you must be able to justify it and trace it back, and you would have made the same decision as if a human made it or it was automated. So this extension of the AI Act and so forth is playing on that more strongly, but the principles are the same. You should know what you're doing with the data, and you should be able to stand by the outcomes of that if a human was making a conscious decision and abiding by the law. So I think if you're thinking of how to advance, and maybe and you know that the framework for a data governance approach isn't strong enough today, you could use the need for AI use to build AI governance, which then needs to be built on data governance, which then supports a more strategic, scalable approach for any consumer of the data, whether it's for AI or anything else.
Yeah, and what that might mean in terms of from a functional perspective within your business, it might be that you leverage your existing, if you do have a data management function team, leverage that team and make sure that they're involved in your AI use cases that you're exploring or deploying. So you're not reinventing the wheel. I was trying to find a better way of saying it, but
you're kicking the
reinventing
tires on that wheel, aren't you? I suppose,
exactly,
to carry that metaphor. So you're seeing whether or not it's fit for purpose, and then making adjustments to that wheel, if indeed if it's necessary. Yeah.
What comes to mind is, I would say, in terms of organizations or businesses when they are exploring AI or trying to implement it, it's going back to the foundation piece. I would say maybe ask yourself those questions. Do we understand because that's going to help with the governance side of things of that AI. Do you understand the real pain points of the business that you're trying to resolve? And also in terms of priority, because I imagine there's going to be a priority in terms of when we're talking pain points or challenges within the business. So do you have visibility of the real business questions You know, we're struggling to get things out of the door on time because we're not being able to leverage lessons learned from previous projects that we've done. We've got loads of siloed data all over the place, and we'd want to be able to leverage AI to bring that all together into one platform that we can draw insights from to make better decisions. So these are the generic pain points that I'm saying, but the point is articulate those business problems, because if it's going back to the stats that we had at the beginning of the webinar, having clear use cases for your solution is like in engineering, the sentence is always, if you are able to articulate your problem properly and correctly and accurately, you're halfway through the solution already.
Well, I think it's right to ask provocative questions to people, you know, because you're basically wanting to build trust, aren't you, in the way that people are operating today, in the data, in the people. And I find that if you ask a reasonable question, then and there is there's a decent answer back, people just go, oh yeah, this is what I do. This is how I do it. I'm pretty confident it works. If people might react a little bit more defensively when they kind of know it's not that great, they're kind of cobbling things together on the fly. The reporting process is a bit disjointed, or they're adapting things after an event. And then that's a kind of vulnerability which I think needs to be collaboratively discussed to work out, how do we improve it? How do we lift that trust level? And that I think I'm deliberately sort of highlighting the next slide around the trust, because I mean, you talk often about how you use the different gaining the trust in AI. Do you want to elaborate a bit more on that, how you see it?
Yeah, so trust in AI, it goes back, I think, to when we're talking about data generally. There's a tendency to always think of it, I'm generalizing here, I apologize to the audience if you don't think that way, but there is a tendency to think of the technical side of things quite a lot. So our data lakes, Fabric, Databricks, Purview, like we're thinking about the technology. But when we're talking about understanding and having control and feeling that we can trust a solution and what it's providing to us as output, it's not just the data, it's not just what you're feeding into it. It's not just the tech side of things, as in the model. It's a whole ecosystem that solution is sitting in. So how your people are working with it, do they have the right skills? Are they talking to each other? Is it very siloed processes that we're talking about, or very siloed functional processes within your business, which makes it a nightmare to build trust, because they all have different definitions, they all have different ways of interpreting the data, capturing in different formats. So it's not just the data values, it's not just your tech, it's also the people aspect of things, the trust in the process. So that's what I see with those three columns. And I think, sorry, Richard, and I think in terms of to be able to, because the question that the organization will be asking is, well, where do I start to build that trust? Yes, okay, you're saying data process model, but where do I start? And that's one of the key things. It's understanding or starting to have that conversation with what your business capabilities are when it comes to data. So do you have a data strategy? Do you have data governance in place? How's your reporting within the business? How's your master data management like? What's the change management culture within the organization? So bucketing it into capabilities of the business helps you then distill that into actions that will then provide you trust in your data, in your process, in your technology, in this case, in the AI model.
Yeah, I think I'm one of these people that is very much wants to lean on evidence. So you can ask, it's fair to ask a question, and then I think there needs to be some kind of, like someone says, oh, it's a strategy. Okay, great. But then, okay, so let's have a look at where that data is coming from and how good is that data and how do we know it's the level that you're talking about? And if you can answer all those questions, and I think if you are of a similar mindset to myself and you're relying on the outputs to make decisions or to utilize for an AI process, then great. If I mean, there is elements of PR involved. There's definitely things like how do we build the customer perception that we're doing the right thing, even if maybe it's not 100% yet, or maybe you don't want to show all the evidence because it's too much data. There's no point in telling every customer every process you do. So how do you lift the PR perspective and get people to trust you? I think there's a lot of, I mean, just casually, just thinking off the top of my head, if there's a lot of adverts you see on the TV between, and it's all about lifting the perception of large organizations about how what a welcoming and family-friendly style company they might be. But in reality, they've got other things on their mind. So how do you change the
Mm.
perception of something so that you can get on and process the things you want to do and achieve the things you want to do for those customers, admittedly, but also for investors and stakeholders in that company. So yeah, there's that. Leaning a little bit more into the world that I witness, if you don't mind, if you can go on to the
Yeah.
next slide. Um, in a very practical sense, when I talk to some of our customers of Quest, and they want to talk about how do we actually build some substance behind the AI model that we're actually trying to build and achieve here. Um, there's a number of different columns here on this slide, which I think are important. If you've got an AI model, then there needs to be a clear definition of what its intention is for. Why have you made it? Why has a data scientist or somebody said, I need something for this? There must be a purpose for it. So that definition, that request, that conversation needs to be had. If you're going to create that, then the lawful part that we talked about, the guiding principles, if there's a way, and there is, admittedly, so I'm touching on the product to touch it. If there's a way, such as within the Erwin Data Intelligence Suite that we advocate use of, we have a business glossary which allows you to create those different components, those regulations and policies and processes and business terms and put properties and relationships to create narratives to do that. So you're dictating what you want to achieve, i.e., abide by the law, your best practices, and so forth, and where they apply, so that you can link that to the AI models and say, this is what compliance means to us. When we're looking at the provenance side, with on the data catalog side, you can scan all the different data sources and reverse engineer ETL code and BI reports, and then you can understand where that data is coming from. So when these difficult questions are being asked, well, how do I trust it? How do I know what's happening here at the company? You're building out a very detailed column level understanding of where that data is coming from that you want to use for your AI and how it's classified and therefore how you should be using it, how you should be processing it. And then when you're turning towards the data quality of the data sets you're using for the purpose, we can profile the content, we can use Gen AI within our product to understand how good or bad the data is. We can look at rules, we can look at any missing data, duplicates, things like that. And you can build your own logic in as well. But that gives you a scoring mechanism to say, this data that you're using for this AI model came from over here and it's 90% good and it meets these needs. And therefore you are building naturally that trust level up to be able to say, we can use this for this purpose. How do we know that the outcome of this AI model is going to be great? Because we've got all of these top quality ingredients going in, which allow us to follow this methodology successfally.
You can confidently qualify the data
Yeah,
because you've covered all these previous pillars that you have.
yeah. So where I was saying, kicking the tires or asking provocative questions and things like that. You are basically saying, do these things exist today? Maybe your data governance framework's already pretty good, Maybe it needs some fundamental changes. Maybe there's sources which people are using today which are not well governed, and they need to have that level of governance on them, and understanding. Maybe there's people complaining about the quality of data, and you're not assessing that particular source in a logical manner today. Maybe that needs to be looked at. So that way, you do understand all these different components to the AI side. And if you have a central governing body of sorts, or a domain-based governing bodies who can then certify these products, or AI models, interchangeably used for data products there, you can then say, well, all the right people have looked at this. We've considered the law, regulatory aspects to it, because our data protection officer and other compliance teams have looked at it. The IT teams have looked at it and verified that it's the right sources. Our quality teams have kept it to a high standard. We know that maybe the ethics team have reviewed it and said, "Oh, yes, you're following our."
We have the right stakeholders involved in those
Yeah,
conversations.
they're all involved at the right time to build a really structured approach, which is scalable, repeatable. When anybody says, "I need a new model," or "I need to ask about this," or whatever, and so then you can certify it and have this available to the broader organization. So if anybody said, "Where's it coming from? I need to search and find this," or "I want to request access to that content, that same model," or "I want to request a new model," then they can do through all the same solution. So it's building out a structured framework using solutions such as ours, using partners such as yourself to make sure that strategy comes to fruition and it is repeatable and scalable. So if another, say in real life, you have a merger or an acquisition, or you move into a new country or a new product line or whatever it might be, you're replicating that framework, those principles again in that world, and creating that documentation and content so that it can be used over and over again. So that's sort
It's
of
structured. Yeah, it's
structured.
like it's structured and a standardized approach as much as possible.
Mm.
And it goes back to the point around the PR side that you mentioned earlier, having a structured and standardized approach, and having, so for example, leveraging the tools to be able to explain the data, to be able to explain the lineage of it. And with AI now supporting data governance capabilities, you can use AI, for example, to help you map the lineage, or to derive what the data models might be by feeding into it in Excel, for example. So there's a lot of capabilities around the reverse, using AI to help you with data governance, and using tooling also, like you mentioned.
Well, I'd like to think that over the last 5 years or so, I've influenced some of the direction that our design is like. Because if anyone hears Erwin, they tend to refer to the Erwin data modeler, which is like 32 years old or something right now. Whereas the Erwin Data Intelligence Suite covers all the bases that are on the screen at the moment. So all of the different aspects for bringing this governance together, and so you do the modeling, and then you can synchronize with the data catalog that we have, our business glossary, the marketplace, the data quality elements, to bring it all together. And so we are continuously adapting to help companies govern AI in their own use, but we're also, as you referred to, using AI ourselves to some of those mundane tasks, to build out glossary content, to join a glossary with a data catalog in one place. The way that operates to make life easier will be built in, or is built in. So we're ever advancing and listening to our customers and taking that on board.
So. Which is a rapidly evolving market, which is a rapidly evolving landscape when it comes to what clients require in terms of the tooling capabilities. I think fundamentally there are some foundational bits around, which I'm going to move on to the next slide, if that's okay with you.
Yes, do. Because I mean, just to hand over to you these, we obviously focus on solutions at Quest with the software itself, and this is I think this is important to have something, a vehicle of sorts, to be able to say, well, this is a component that everybody can metaphorically, in different teams around our organization, put content into, whether you're in compliance or IT or data science or whatever. But then without a strategy, without a process or a human element to this, it's not really going to go very far. And we do see this. Sometimes customers do buy solutions and don't think about the longer term goals. What use cases do you want to achieve and at what time? And so that guidance, the people side, which you specialize in, I think is essential. Otherwise, you bought a car and left it on the drive and you've not done anything with it. And that's a concern to us. So that's why we try to urge the best practices. So how have you seen this? What's your guidance in this space?
I love the analogy with the car. It's like having a beautiful car in the garage, but we can't drive it because we don't have the right skills to drive it,
Yes,
or we don't have the right fuel to put into it in the first place.
exactly.
No, that's a good analogy. I think I focus on the people-driven data management here because I think people is really what's going to make or break any data initiative. And I'm saying any data initiative, not just AI. Because ultimately, if we're saying that data is the lifeblood of businesses, which is what we see a lot of LinkedIn, that wording or that phrase, it's lifeblood. The people is really the health of that enterprise, how healthy those data initiatives will be, how collaboration, how behaviors of your business users are being impacted when we're talking about data management. So the people aspect of things links into, has fingers into many things. It's the behaviors, it's the culture, it's how well something is going to get adopted, how likely solutions that you're, or initiatives or policies that you're trying to implement will stick. It's all down to the people behavior. I would say the other thing is around not going too big at the start. It's going back to the foundation piece. When you are when you're aware that you are ultimately dealing with changing behaviors and changing mindsets around data, i.e. people, within the business, to build capabilities, you need to be able to, it's better to start with small use cases so that you can show value quicker, and which means you can get buy-in quicker, because most business users are busy trying to get things out of the door, business priorities, day-to-day tasks. So it is challenging to see the bigger picture. Whereas if you can hone down on specific use cases where you can say, okay, we are doing this data governance or data cleanse, or we're putting this new data platform to solve this problem, and oh yes, it's helped us save X amount of time. We don't have to spend a whole week managing Excel sheets, for example. So finding those links with how is it actually helping people within the business helps you show value fast. So all of that to say, it's not just a high level terminology, data management. It's very important that leaders within a business, whether we're talking CEOs or team leads or even functional leads, there's always that mindset that, okay, we're talking data, but it's people behavior, it's the ecosystem that it sits in terms of the processes around it. And then ultimately, all of that is supported by technology, or drives what the technology needs to be.
Yeah, I agree. I think where I've seen our customers be most successful is when they have some real determined use cases that are like sprints, where they get a very sort of quick return on their investment of what their time and energy and money that go into something. So after, if they've got like somebody, maybe a chief data officer, a visionary, and they say, right, this is what I want to do for the next 5 years. You can't just say hold your breath for 5 years. You've got to say, okay, over the next 6 months, we're going to see this. Over the next 12 months, we'll see this. So that you could got something to actually report back on and say, I've achieved something. We've targeted a domain within our data, within the company, and we've understood it. We've documented the glossary. We've harvested the metadata from these systems. We've understood
Big win by
the
itself to be
yeah,
able to build a glossary that you have a standardized understanding of definitions
yeah.
around business. That's a yeah.
So if you did it and that was got some reward, find somebody who's shares your mindset, who's then going to be able to say, right, well, I'll be on board, I'll be the guinea pig, I want to be able to do this. So then you build that content, and then say, well, this is great. And then other people might then see the results and start knocking on the door and want to be next in the queue to be able to then be part of that sort of journey, that culture shift. And if you're solving problems which people are actually asking to get solved, like why do I have to keep manipulating data from this report to tell a narrative which I wanted to? Why can't we fix something? How do you build the confidence in that data quality and that report that I care about? How do you make that process a little bit better? So if you're solving real life issues, and building a strong foundation that you can be replicated, I think that's a good approach. And then you take, to your point, I think you've mentioned in the past about taking the people on the journey with you, then that means that you can say, well, you're part of this. It's not something I've worked on my own in the garage somewhere, and I'm going to do a big reveal and hope you like it. It's more of a journey that you've got on with a particular domain you've chosen, and you're defining it. So it's not just an IT on its own; it's a business IT collaboration with a particular purpose.
It is a landscape. Yeah,
Yeah,
it is a landscape.
there's a lot. I think there's an element of that which sometimes is not considered, and I think sometimes the kind of direction some of the programs take might be down to the personalities involved. And that's why I think it really healthy for people to consider other companies and the other personalities, and to go to events and to socialize, to hear what's worked and what hasn't worked, so that you can then build that into your mantra when you do something in your own organization.
And it's not a straightforward thing to do, because
No.
what we're alluding to here is having that top-down approach. This is the vision, and you're trying to drive it to the functions. But at the same time, what we're talking about is your use cases need to be from down, driving the top vision, because it's the real problems that people are seeing on the ground that needs to feed into what the vision, what the broader strategy needs to be. And it goes back to behaviors, to culture, to that mindset, to data literacy. I mean, in Oakland, we have a data governance framework that helps structure the approach or the roadmap towards delivering data governance. But we always say to clients, even though there's, I think, about 7 components in that framework, you don't have to start with all 7. It depends where you are on that journey, where you are on the journey. And then we start from okay, do we need to just understand your landscape at the moment and start building roles and accountabilities around your key critical data sets? And maybe let's start with that. And then we talk about education or communication or having KPIs and metrics further down the line. But if you starting the conversations with, here are a bunch of KPIs, we're going to be using that as a starting point for data governance, that might put people off. Like, I'll have better things to do. I have a business priority to deliver at the moment. So KPIs, maybe a little bit further down the line.
So I think I've had one eye on the questions list. There's only one question in there, but it's related to something I was about to say anyway. Because the question is how can we get investment for AI governance, and that is, I was going to say that if you know that your company has a number of broad objectives, typically a CEO or somebody would say, this is what the values are that matter to us, these are our objectives for the year, or this, or so forth, then if you can attach your intentions to one of those key pillars that might exist, you can say, well, we want to be more automated, we want to be more dependent on AI or whatever it might be. Well, you say, fantastic. Then in that case, we might need to invest in some of that data governance framework. We might need to invest in understanding our landscape or investing in data quality improvements or whatever it might be. So if there's something that you're echoing that's coming on down from on high, for example, then that's helpful. If you can find particular use cases that you can build a business proposal for, such as maybe you care about topic number one, but there's other teams who have a similar agenda, or there's other teams that people like myself or Zareene can help with, who we can combine that world so that your argument makes more cost-efficient sense, to more be appealing to people who are going to sign off programs of work, then I think that would greatly help. So yeah, that's how I think. Collaborate. Yeah.
Oh, I think you've nailed it, Richard. It's being able to articulate that use case, that business use case, and we do that with a lot of clients to really take a step back. Let's look at the business. Let's look at your capabilities. Let's really look at the pain points and the challenges that, as a business, you're currently facing, and then you go into, okay, what the solution might look like from an AI perspective, what structure you might need to govern that AI and the specific data sets. So don't go full broad business use case unless you're confident that you're going to get budget for it. But usually honing down on very specific use cases makes it more straightforward to articulate what you need the money for, what you need the budget for. And it's always going back to, what problem are you trying to solve in the business?
I think one of the welcoming kind of conversations that I have with customers or prospective customers is when they've got a plan. They've got, this is what I like to do over time, and they've the excitement, the ambitions there, but sometimes the budget might have to be argued for, and that's understandable. So you might say, well, we'll start you off small. We'll give you so many things. You get a lot of things for free anyway, but you get so many things which you can then start you off, and you can achieve something over the course of maybe a year's contract, before then entering a 3 or 5 year contract. And obviously the longer you enter in, it's cheaper. So then it kind of works out more cost efficient. But but if from the strategic perspective, you are taking on things which are achievable, manageable, and agreeable with people that are going to sponsor it. So then you start to show that return, that achievement, which then it's a snowball effect. Then it's scalable. It's a conversation that can be had at different levels.
And it helps you get out of that proof of concept trap, where you can make that jump to actual real life deployment, because you're trying to resolve real business problems, and you're considering the whole aspect of, it's not just the tech, it's a whole ecosystem that the tool needs to sit in, etc. I'm keeping an eye on the time.
Yes.
We have a few seconds left. No, we don't. It's 2:00 now.
No, we don't. But I do see on the question pop in. Maybe we can follow up on an email or something afterwards on that one, if we want to. But yes, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Georgina. We'll try and come back to you by email. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you, Dean.
All right. Thank you very much for listening in.
Thank you. Thanks,
Lovely
everyone who joined.
Speak to you, Richard.
Cheers.
Take care.
Have a good afternoon. Bye for now.
Bye.